Good morning, everyone. I'm just a minute or two early, so I am going to give it a couple minutes for people to log on and sign in. But I hope everyone is having a good day and that you have some fun stuff planned for this afternoon. Today I am going to be playing with Well, which is a super fun pattern. So we'll get started in just a minute or two. Alright. So I always kind of want to be able to put on music and stuff when I start, but unfortunately Facebook will turn off my sound if they hear something that they think is copyrighted, even in the background. So, and while I understand that, it makes it tough to put anything on that maybe could catch that flag. So we'll get kind of some quiet time. But all right, it looks like it is 11:30, so I'm gonna get started. Today I am going to be working with the pattern Well. I love this pattern. There are so many things that you can do with this. I was making a list of the different things that I wanted to show you with this pattern today, and I stopped when I hit my usual, 6, 7, 8 ideas, just because I could keep you here all afternoon and going over these different little, little tangulations or variations or different things that you can do with this pattern. I get so excited about all the things that we can do that sometimes I have to rein myself in. But today I have a number of different fun variations and patterns, and I hope you have your either your tangle supplies so you can draw along, or that you brought your favorite beverage so that you can just sit and relax, kind of take some time for yourself this morning. I see I have a couple people logged on. Good morning, Linda. Good morning, Betty. But my videos do stay up, so they are going to be available as often as you'd like to check them out. I am in the process of also putting all the videos up over on my website, because I like the ability to kind of control that a little bit myself. So, all right. So you've seen, you saw some of these. This is your basic well pattern, and I did this with them all going in the same direction. I'm going to show you what I mean by that when I do my first tile. But this is them in a standard grid, kind of fairly large, and with no real embellishments to it. And then here is Well, again, all going in the same direction, with a background pattern in a wonky grid. I'm not much of a grid girl. I've talked about this before in classes. I don't love drawing grids. I'm not great at straight lines. So with that being said, I like when you kind of mix and match and twist stuff. So this just has a little bit of shading and some fun stuff going on there. This I'm going to come back to in a little while. This is Well as well. Play on words there. But I want to kind of isolate one of my little segments here and show you how this is the same pattern. So we can do some cool stuff with that. And we'll come back and we'll look at that a little bit more, a little further on. Good, I see I have a whole bunch more people. Hi, Diane. Hi, Barbara, Sandy, Sandra, and Sue. It looks like I have a couple Barbaras and I have a couple of Sandras, or Sandys this morning. So, good morning to everybody. My voice is a little harsh this morning, so I'm just going to drink my tea as we go. So if you hear my spoon clinking, that's what's going on. I love doing these lives because it gives me the opportunity to take a pattern that I love, or one that I don't use very often, or even ones that I use all the time, and to force myself to think outside the box. Sometimes I'm really great. I'm going to draw my dots while I talk. Sometimes I'm really great at being creative and using my patterns in different ways, and other times I just get stuck in a rut, and that can be boring, and then I find I don't do as much tangling. So by having myself look at a pattern in new ways and think of other things that I can do with it, it really kind of keeps my creativity and my tangling fresh. Alright, so this tile is going to be my basic pattern, and I am actually going to divide it in half because I'm going to show you two versions of the I never know the best way to say it. The standard, the most common way of drawing this pattern. So I'm going to draw a grid, and I'm going to do that. I know I don't want to go off my edges, so I'm just going to kind of come a little bit in from either side, and then I'm going to break this up evenly. So I'm going to create an aura there, one here. They don't have to be exact. I just want them to be similar-ish in size, right? So then I'm going to turn my tile. I'm going to do the same thing, because I don't want to have to do any partials on this tile. I don't want them, where half of one is hanging off the tile. So I want my grid to all kind of fit in. All right. So I'm just kind of eyeballing this. I don't worry too much about everything being exact. So this is fairly small, and that's okay, because I want to, I don't want it to be, I wanted to have enough to show you several different ones. So I actually am going to move my string, my dividing string. I don't like that either. Look, I erased. Shh, we won't tell. But I wanted to kind of divide this up so it's about even, half and half on either side. I'm going to focus on the top half of this grid right now, and then I'll focus on the bottom. So with well, it starts out with an orb or a dot or something in the middle of each pattern, or in the middle of each grid, okay? So, and that's going to be the same for either way you draw it. So I'm drawing all of those at once. And the more I think about it, I'm actually just going to ignore this line. I'm going to break it up right here in the middle. And I'm going to do half here and half here. So you kind of get an even number of both. It'll let you see the differences in the patterns in both directions. So when I draw well with them all going in the same direction, I start around this little circle, this little orb, right? And I'm going to do a takeoff and land kind of stroke, and then I'm going to turn my tile, and I'm going to do a takeoff and land kind of stroke, and I'm going to turn my tile, right? And I'm going to do that so that this line spirals into each corner. So I kind of have something that looks like a camera, like the lens of a camera or a pinwheel. And if I'm going to make them all go in the same direction, I'm going to do that. Again, take off and land, turn my tile, take off and land, turn my tile. I'm going to do one row, and then I'll finish these off. Okay, and I can start with any of them. So I could take off and land, take off and land, and all I'm doing is making sure that my spirals go in the same direction. Okay, and you can see here how it starts to get similar patterns like we get when we do tessellations and stuff with paradox or cadent. This tangle has a lot in common with both of those. Okay, so that's one row. Now I'm going to do the second row because I'm going to do this row the same way, right? So take off and land, take off and land, take off and land. And what I mean by that, when I say take off and land, is I could start my line right here, but it would look overly straight. It wouldn't have a smooth flow to it. So by starting and kind of curving around that orb that's already there, not only does it give me a little depth around that orb, but it creates a smoother stroke. So there we go. And again, I'm going to do that. It gives me that little curve, that little flare to it. Right? So I'm going to do that with these first two rows. And you can see how this adds all kinds of different patterns within patterns, right? So if you look here, you can kind of see this little like almost scroll type shape going, and it looks like a woven pattern. You could leave it like this, and I'm actually going to do some of that in this other one that I have set up and started for you. Or you can come in and you can add kind of a little like seed shape to each of these strokes, like a little pinwheel. And what's fun is you can vary these shapes, whether you add a pattern into them, whether you leave them plain, how you shade it. All of those things are going to give you a different look and a different feel depending on what you do with them. So even just with this first pattern, you can see how many options and how many opportunities we have with this pattern to do some really cool, really fun stuff. Right. So I'm just going to finish this up. And if this is your first time finding my live, I do these every Saturday at 11:30. I also want to make an announcement. October is coming next month, or next week, and next month, but next week. And I know that it seems very, very quick to be talking about October, but October is also Inktober. And if you don't know what Inktober is, I'll post some information on my page later today about it. Inktober is a creative project, and the Zentangle community has kind of embraced it, and we now do our own version. So for the month of October, every morning at 11:30-ish, I say ish because I can't always get here exactly on time, I'm going to go live for probably about 10 minutes. So it'll be a much shorter version of this where I will be demoing the pattern for that day. So I will do 31 days of live. Saturdays, I will take those patterns from that list, and I will still do my exploration. I'm just going to use that day's pattern to do it with. So I hope that you will consider joining me in that. I actually am going to break out my Zentangle journal that I've not gotten to yet. You can see it's still all completely empty. So I'm going to break that out, and I'm going to break that in during Inktober. It's a great way to kind of jumpstart your Tangle journey or your Tangle practice, or even to just kind of rededicate yourself. And the nice part is, because it's the patterns are already chosen for you, there's no thinking. I'm going to demo how to do them, so if you don't know them, you can follow along. And it's not a huge time commitment, and those will all stay up live. So again, you'll be able to come back and reference those. All right, so you can see how this pattern is just a slightly smaller version of this. Obviously, you can certainly vary the size, and right there gives you variation in your pattern, right? But one of the cool things about this pattern is we did these all going in the same direction. So now I'm going to do them So I'm going to do the same thing where I take off and land in this first little pinwheel shape, this first little square, right? But now I'm going to come to this one, and where I've been going to the right the whole time, this time I'm going to change it up, and I'm going to make these little curves off to the left. Now I'm going to come to the next one, and I'm going to go to the right, all the way around. And then on this one, I'm going to go to the left. Okay, so you can see that this gives us a very different pattern than this. Remember how this had that kind of little like scroll shape, and this is a different shape entirely. So now again, I'm going to come down here. I'm going to go, because I went to the right here, I want to go to the left on this one. So I'm just mixing it up and alternating them as I go. So that one went to the left, so this one will go to the right. And depending on how much curve you put into these, that can change the way that your patterns look as well. So this is a fun one to just kind of play with and see all the different things that you can do with this. And then this one will go to the right. So I hope everybody kind of gets that and kind of sees how you end up with two completely different frameworks for this pattern. And now I can come in and I can once again add that little shape, right? And now it once again looks almost the same. It just has a kind of a different spiral to it, but you get a different look. And I think that that's a lot of fun to play with. All right, so I'm going to set that one off to the side. If anyone has any questions, please don't hesitate to post them in chat. Marcella, you asked 11:30 what time zone? It's 11:30 Eastern. I'm a New York girl, so I'm terrible at time zones. So I just always like to tell everybody everything's always going to be in my time zone. So it's always going to be Eastern, because that way I don't have to do math. All right, let's see. So that is, those were our basic well pattern. So now I wanted to come back to this spiral, because I wanted to show you a little bit about kind of what I just did. I had these all going in the same direction, and I'm going to continue to do that because that's the way I tend to draw it the most. So I have these spiraling to the right. My takeoff and land was a little messy there, but that's okay. So they're all going in the same direction on this piece. And I'm just going to do one row, and then I'll finish it later for the pattern sheet. I do a pattern sheet at the end of every live so that you can have it kind of as a reference. So I have a partial one here, so that one goes off that way, that would go this way, this would come to here, and then I would have one that would kind of come up and meet there. Okay, so there's my, and I also, with this one, I wanted to show you, I don't know if you can see that very well, but I did my grid in pencil because I don't always love the look of a grid. And what's kind of nice with this is if I draw it in pencil, it just fades into the background, and then you don't necessarily see those lines later on. So instead of adding in this curve, this little like flower petal kind of shape, right? I chose to pick one section, so the top, so this little triangle-y shape, and this little triangle-y shape here, and I chose to add in some little wedge shapes, and the tops of them are kind of rounded, and then I'm going to flip it, and I'm going to do it on the bottom too. And I could have alternated this if I wanted to, and done these little wedge shapes on the side shapes, and then it would have really alternated, but I kind of like them stacked together, so I'm going to do it that way. So again, I'm just adding kind of like almost like little pie shapes, and I'm rounding the tops. I'm pulling it down, so it's a little line, and then I'm pulling it down, and I'm just kind of fitting it into that little wedge, because each of these is made up of those 4 little wedges that were created by making that, that takeoff and land stroke. So this one also would have that wedge, this little half one that I have over here on the side. And then this one right here, and here. So you can see how it's the same pattern, but I've done something completely different with it than I've done here, right? So that's, giving you some ideas, and I hope that, this sparks your own ideas, your own creativities. And then of course I can come in and I can fill in all these little interstitial spaces. And that creates a little bit more interest and some fun little things going on. I'll go back and darken those all in later. And then of course I'll do another one here. But you can see how I did this one and this one, but that it would have definitely created a different look if I'd done this one and this one, and then this one and this one. Or if I'd colored these in dark and then left those light. You can do a million different things just playing with that. Or if instead of going all in the same direction, I had gone in the alternating directions like we did on the second part of the first tile. Okay, so those are a couple of different variations. I wanted to show you something that I think is super fun. These don't always have to go into a square grid. So I'm gonna make a border so that I can have a pretty tile when I'm all done. Now, I am not fantastic at drawing hexagons, so I'm gonna do this in pencil first. I'm going to make a line going down the middle of my tile. I'm going to turn my tile, make another one going down, intersecting that. I'm going to turn it, and I'm going to go from corner to corner so that I have a whole little thing going on where I have a whole bunch of little triangles. Now that I have that fairly straight-ish, it's not straight by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a fairly straight-ish little shape, and I could have made it more hexagon if I wanted to, but I just kind of wanted the illusion. I would have finished off my edges if I were going to make it a hexagon, but again, that feels like math, and it's a Saturday. June, I see that you're asking if this is available for access. Yes, all of my Facebook Lives stay up on my page. As far as I can tell, there's no limit to how many Facebook will let me have, but I'm also in the process of transferring them over to my website, which is whimsybykelly.com. But you can look on my Facebook page under the tab that says Lives or Videos. So they will stay up there. I have no intention of taking them down. All right, so now that I have these little triangle shapes right, in what would be a hexagon if I felt like doing math on a Saturday. You can see how that's obviously going to be different than a grid, right? So, but just because it's different than a grid doesn't mean that it is not a super cool thing to play with. So now I'm going to come in and I'm going to add in some dots, some little, and they're not really dots, they're more of like a little black pearl or an orb right around the center of each of your triangles. If you are following along and you think I'm going a little fast, I do want to assure you that in a regular class I do go slower, but because I want to get a whole bunch of different designs out here and ideas for you, I usually start stuff and finish some of it, and then I finish it up in my patterns later, but all my videos stay up so that you can rewind them and watch them as many times as you want. And I'm always available if you want to, you know, shoot me a question about something that I did too. So I have all of my little black pearls, my orbs in there. I'm going to treat these the same way, right? So here's my little dot. I'm going to take off and land and go to each of these corners in my triangle. I've worn off another nib. I've kind of switched from 01s a lot because I keep doing that. I've been pressing really hard. Use a lighter touch. This is a do as I say, not as I do kind of thing. Your hands will thank you. Alright, so I did one. I like to go in the same direction. I find it to be more soothing for me. Unless I'm specifically trying to get that other pattern and that other look, most of the time when I draw well, I go in the same direction. And I know a lot of other people do it the exact opposite, so there is no wrong. But I just find it easier to just remember that I'm always going in the same direction. So curving it to the right. So this time, because it's not a square, I only need 3 arcs. So that's 1 to that point, turn my tile, 1 to that point, turn my tile, 1 to that point. Okay, going to work my way around. So again, 1 to this point, 1 to this point, turn my tile, 1 to that center point. Okay, and really, again, you can start in any direction with your takeoff and land. As long as you're just turning your tile, you'll always end up where you want to be. So this is another way to use well that will give you a cool pattern, cool variations, and something new and fun to play with. So I love that shape. I think that this is super fun, and when I shade it, I can come in and I can add some shading here and here. I'm just adding a little bit of graphite. You can shade these in so many different ways. I'm going to show a couple different versions as we go, and then I just, soften it. Oh, missed one. Shading's where the magic happens, and it turns it into this cool 3D kind of image instead of just being, 2D and kind of flat. And so this is adding some dimension, but I'll come back later and I'll add some cool highlights and things like that with my shading. So this is well done in triangles to kind of create some cool fun things there. And then of course you could do a pattern in the background. You could come in and you could do auras on the insides of all of these to add some more interest, some more excitement. So that's another way. So let's see. I'm not even halfway done with the things that I wanted to show you today. When I first started doing my lives, I said that they were going to be 15 minutes long, and they're not. They're usually closer to like half hour, 45 minutes. We're at half an hour already today. And I try and show and talk about a few different, I know I have some different and new people today who have joined me, so I do want to talk about some of the things that I always like to point out. You can use most patterns as a string. So if I were to draw this, I could then use these as a string and do different patterns in all of these different little spaces. You could take a smaller version of this and use it as a border. So you can use things as strings, as borders, as fill for other patterns. But one of the things that I love to do is I like to try and turn all patterns into flowers. It's just kind of like a little challenge that I have given myself. And while some of them, you know, lend themselves very, very easily to that, here's Flux, which is one of my, this is my mac and cheese pattern. So Flux obviously makes really cool flowers. But so does Be Light, which is a pattern that I never really thought would make good flowers, but I decided that I wanted to see if I could do it, and it actually is one of my favorites. So with that being said, this pattern is almost too easy to turn into flowers. It already looks like there's a yellow and white spiraled flower that has this kind of pattern to it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we can draw this not in a grid, okay? And I'm going to do that to make my flower design. I see Sue said she's putting off laundry, so she's not in a hurry. That's good, because this is a really fun technique. I'm going to start out, I am going to, with my pencil, because remember I said I don't necessarily love to see my grid lines, I'm going to kind of put a divider line in the center as if I was going to make a grid, right? And then I'm going to very lightly sketch in a second line, again, as if it was a grid. And now I'm going to go outside the box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some little boxes. So I have two little ones there, and then I kind of have that bigger one there, right? And then maybe I'm going to just create another box. And these don't have to line up. They don't have to be the same sizes. Think of this as kind of a free-form little exercise. Maybe you want a smaller one here, right? So you have kind of this boxy structure going on. But it's not really a grid per se. It's just kind of a free-form scaffolding or outline, okay? So now I'm going to come in. I'm going to go into each of those little boxes, and I'm going to create, and I like to draw a little orb, but you can draw, you know, whatever you wanted. It could be a little pearl. You could make teeny tiny gems, whatever it is that you want to do. And you can vary the size of it depending on the size of that box you drew, or you can keep them all about the same. I made that one a little smaller. I like to, so I've done that. I'm going to put a dot in the center because something else you can do to change up the look of this is to embellish these little centers, right? So maybe, you know, I'm going to add, so now I've kind of got like a little pearl nestled inside a little orb. And it doesn't always work super well on the tiny ones, but you get the idea. And if your bigger ones have it, then the smaller ones, your brain tells us that that we've replicated it. So that's something to definitely think about. So now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to take off and land, turn my tile, take off and land, turn my tile, take off and land, turn my tile. Camera shutter, right? So, but now, and I added a little bit of a little curve to that. I really want to kind of round these. And I'm not going to do all of this, but I'm just definitely going to do some of this so that you can see a few of these and how nestled together in these kind of little funky boxes that are going in all different directions, you can have a little field or bouquet of these flowers. And you can add more, and I'll do it in the next one. You can add more curve to these if you want to. So when I draw this, if I, follow along and then I think about making it rounder when I make that arc, and this just takes a little bit of practice. So I kind of arc it up and make it rounder. Then when I come in and I make my petal, it's a little more round than it was before, and they kind of look a little more woven together. Okay, so let's see, I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to add some little embellishments to this. So I'm rounding those to make them flowery. Like I said, this one feels almost too easy to make into flowers. But now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to add a little arc from that initial point, right? And if maybe they don't all match up exactly the way you wanted it to, you can actually add your arc on the outside. So this one's a little skinnier than I wanted, so I'm just going to arc that up. So we've got kind of this pinwheel thing going. And you probably would recognize these flowers if they were white and they had hints of yellow on them. I don't remember what they're called, but they're really pretty. So I'm going to do that on all of them. And some I'm drawing from the inside and some I'm drawing from the outside. It really depends on where it feels like it fits. It's kind of a little bit of an intuitive thing where you just kind of play with it. And it's just paper. I mean, while it's nice to have really nice paper, it's still just paper. You can still always draw more. There you go. Alright, so I have 4 of those there that are flower shaped. And, Humaria, yes, thank you. It's been driving me crazy. So, you can see I have those flowers in there, right? Now, I'm going to come in and I'm going to embellish just these little insides a little bit. So I'm just taking my pen and I'm putting it in the little point, and I'm doing some little flicking strokes. And I'll do that on all of them. And I'm not doing it in where I put that little arc. And then when I shade, I'll also shade in that area. So I will finish off this tile. What I will do when it's all said and done, and the reason I did the top is because I wanted to show you how I'm going to kind of finish this up. I'm actually going to go and I'm going to do an aura all the way around the outside of these. So just one aura. Encompassing all of that, and then I will, I'll add in these other ones that are down here as well, and then in the background I can do, another pattern. So maybe I'll do something like a printemps. So just some nice loose big spirals in the background, and that, you can see that has a very delicate, very different feel for a tile than this one or this one. Right? And it's all the same pattern. Okay, so let's see. So we have just the ideas we've done so far. So we've got this one, and we've got this one, we've got this one. We have our wonky grid, which is, you know, our standard pattern just on a wonky grid, but I did fill in the background, which is something that you can do to kind of change things up. And if you've noticed, I've changed up these centers a couple times. Sometimes I color them in, sometimes I leave them empty, sometimes I add a little bit of an embellishment. Just by changing all those little details will give you a completely different look with your pattern. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to do one more. I was going to do two, but I think I'm just going to do one more, and I'm going to talk about the other one. So again, I'm going to do my dots and my border. And I know a lot of people don't always do their string and their border and things like that. I often work without a string, but I almost always put in my dots and my border. I am one of those people that when faced with an empty page, I think, what should I draw? By putting my dots and my border down, it for some reason triggers something in my brain, you know, in the pure Zentangle method, to just kind of stop, take my breath, relax, remember that it doesn't have to be perfect, that there really are no mistakes, and that I can just start drawing. And it really does work that way for me. So, one other thing I like to do is I like to draw macro. And if any of you are photographers or have photography friends, you know that's diving in on something in a large format. Betty, you asked about Zentangle classes. I do periodic classes. I don't actually have any 101 classes this month, but my newsletter just came out. I will post the link to it on my Facebook page. You can also sign up for my newsletter from my Facebook page, and that will give you a list of all of my classes. And I have some really cool ones coming up. I'm actually doing a combined class we're calling Pumpkin Spice Pieces with, it'll be myself and Yvonne Westover. We're going to do some tangling and throw in a little bit of watercolor and really talk about combinations and how you can combine things to do all kinds of different things in the tangling world. And that it's not the same as this, you know, changing things up this way, but we are going to give you different options to create some cool, fun holiday, not holiday, but fall themes. And you can always check out all of my classes on my website at whimsybykelly.com. There's a classes tab, and everything I have going on is listed under there. Alright, so let's see. One more. I'm going to do a macro. So I'm going to look at this, where I have my border, as my one square. So as if this was a grid square. I'm going to put a center in here, and again, I went fairly large because this is going to be macro. It is going to be a larger section. I'm going to, again, I'm going to do my takeoff and land in one direction. I'm going to turn it. I'm going to go in the other direction. I'm going to turn it, go in another direction, and then one more. So there's my camera shutter, my, you know, my start to my flower, however you choose to look at it. This would make a great string if I added some skinny little embellishments to that. It would give me a great string to then come in and tangle with. Or I can just make this, you know, its own piece. So I'm going to, instead of making it curvy, I'm going to make it a little more squared off this time. So it kind of looks like a windmill. Because changing the shape of these will also give you another look. I see that somebody's having trouble. I do not post them on YouTube, but it will stay here on my Facebook page, so you can come back and visit another time if you're having internet issues. So I have these built in. I am going to, I could leave it like this and I could make it a string, or I could come in and I could do this type of treatment with it where I add in some more, and that's what I think I'm going to do. I'm going to add in some more of these little shapes, and I'm not going to fill the whole thing. I'm just going to put in a couple, and so I've kind of got that little windmill effect going on. And then again, I could fill in the background with other tangles. I could also come in and I could do something fun in the center. So maybe I will just do a ring of little orbs around that center. And then, I don't know, maybe I like to make stuff kind of cohesive and bring one element from one area to different spots on my tile. So it's kind of a macro image or like a fragment. And again, you could use any of these types of things in any of these grids. So you could just repeat it over and over and over as many times as you wanted to. So I could take this and do this in a grid, or I could take this and I could do it in a wonky grid, or in this kind of random freeform grid. I could use this same pattern in the triangles. So really, once you start adding all of these different components and these different things to kind of change up or play with, your possibilities are limitless. And this is one of those patterns that really has so many different variations that I could go for hours on this. I teach a class on paradox, and it's a whole class where we play with the different versions of paradox. And eventually I may create one on well for the same reason. Well has also spawned a couple of different patterns. One's called well, 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 and one's called oh well, that are different variations that are different enough from well but follow many of the same premises. So there's definitely some cool things for you to get started with. I hope you had fun. I hope you learned something. I would love to see what you make. Feel free to post it in the comments. And a little later today, I will have a pattern sheet out that will have all these tiles completed, just for you to use as a reference. So thanks for spending your Saturday morning with me, and I hope to see you again next week. And don't forget, starting on whatever day is the 1st, I think it's Thursday, at 11:30 in the morning, I will go live for probably about 10 or 15 minutes every day to do the Inktober challenge. And I hope to see some of you join me there. Everybody have a great day and enjoy the rest of your weekend.